Good evening. Hi. My name is David Schaefer, Managing Director of the Maltz Museum. Thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion. I want to recognize Maltz Museum co-founders Milton and Tamar Maltz, whose vision guides us every day. Thank you. To the Maltz Museum board and staff, thank you for your continued dedication to our mission. Rabbi Cohen, our appreciation to you and the Temple for hosting this gathering. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Erica Rudin-Loria, the president of the Cleveland Jewish Federation. Audrey and Albert Ratner, thank you for your endorsement and support 3 years ago when we got started, and for your sage advice for me to call Carol Hoover. Carol Hoover, thank you for everything. Your time, your advice, and your friendship. Dr. Sharon Milligan, we would not be here if it were not for your academic influence on this journey. Thank you. And you know who we really wouldn't be here without? The Moss family. Thank you, Reverend Moss, Edwina, to your children, grandchildren, thank you for letting us share your life and your legacy. To our sponsors and donors, did you know that the Maltz Museum is the first museum in the country to introduce an interactive biography of a Holocaust survivor and an interactive biography of a civil rights leader together in one place? We have important stories to share, stories of courage from history and today. Thank you, Audrey and Albert Ratner, Carol Hoover, Cleveland Foundation, KeyBank, the President's Council, the Seme J. and Ruth Begun Foundation. Thank you for making this possible. This week, we announced our new logo. There it is on the screen. Maltz Museum, Respect for All Humanity. This really says it all about who we are as an institution rooted in Jewish values. We believe that we must take care of each other and our community. So tonight, it is with great pride and joy that we celebrate one of the wisest neighbors and dearest friends. Pastor Emeritus of Cleveland Olivet Baptist Church, a nationally recognized civil rights leader, a voting rights advocate, and a founding board member of the Maltz Museum, the one and only, the Reverend Otis Moss Jr. Reverend Moss makes an impact on everyone he meets, the head rabbi for this temple included. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Rabbi Jonathan Cohen.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, honored guests. I am delighted to be here with you on behalf of the Temple-Tifereth Israel and to, for a moment, offer us a moment of blessing and a moment of prayer as we launch this very special evening and honor Reverend Dr. Otis Moss. Our Psalms in Psalm 34 have a moment that I believe captures the essence of what it is that we celebrate here this evening. In Hebrew, it reads as follows: Lechuvanim shim'u li, yirat Adonai alamdechem. Mi haish hechafetz chayim, ohev yamim lirot tov, netzor leshoncha mira, usfatecha midaber mirma. My children, listen to me. This is about the future. This is about our children. I will teach you what it is to recognize the divine. Who is the person eager for life? Who desires the good life? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Speak truth and guard yourself from deceit. Well, I think this represents one core element of the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss. Shun evil and do good. Doing good, not just not speaking evil, but doing good and shunning evil. Seek amity and pursue it. Reverend Moss, we extend to you our hand in amity this evening. Friends, let us pray. May we live lives inspired by the search for the divine, inspired by the wish for goodness, shunning evil in our speech and seeking truth, shunning evil in what we see occurring around us and doing good, seeking peace, seeking justice. May we merit to see a better world. And let us together say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. Your words are as inspiring as this chapel is beautiful. We are right now sitting in the Maltz chapel at the Temple-Tifereth, Israel. When the name says Maltz, you know you are in for something special. We are able to catch up with the museum co-founders, Milt Maltz and Reverend Moss, to hear what two legends have to say about their memories of the 1960s civil rights era and why it's important that we continue to stand up for justice today. Let's take a look.
I'll take you back to the days before there was a special kind of camera and special kind of record. They broke. They were called 78s.
Oh,
and
yes.
I was a DJ in those days. And I remember playing three major artists. One was Ella Fitzgerald, and the other was Nat King Cole,
Oh, yeah.
and the third one was Satchmo. Great, aren't they?
Absolutely.
However, somebody else didn't think that. The phone rang, and it was the general manager. And he says these dirty words, "Get those dash, dash, dash off the air now." And I think to myself, I'm in the wrong side of this business. I want to buy a station.
That kind of attitude at top management says something about the age, the time, the place, and what was happening in the minds of people and in our culture. If you had asked me in the 60s if I would be seeing in the 21st century people marching with Nazi flags, I would have questioned that. I would have said that we will be struggling, yes, but perhaps we will have overcome that phase of human thought and behavior.
And that cork was popped, and it's oozing the fluid of hate around this country today.
Which makes the button on your lapel so relevant. Stop the hate. A message of the Maltz Museum.
Amen. All I can say is thank you so much.
Well, I want to echo Milt's sentiment. Thank you, Reverend Moss. Thank you, Edwina. Your family has given us and this entire community a tremendous gift. Tonight, we are here to celebrate your legacy, and there is one man that most fitting to express the importance of carrying on the torch you have carried and continue to carry forward to light the way for the next generation of young people to see that there is a better way, a kinder way, a more inclusive way. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Reverend Moss's son, who has followed in his father's footsteps as a pastor and as a civil rights activist fighting for racial justice. I'm deeply honored to introduce the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III.
First, I want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to the Maltz Museum for the vision of the Maltz family, for the work that you are doing, as was mentioned in the video, to not only stop the hate, but also light a candle in the midst of a dark moment in American history. The museum and the work of this synagogue will bless generations that are yet to be born. It is one person I remember hearing not too long ago that stated that it is important not what you do now, but what foundation you will lay for the future. So I say thank you for your witness. We say thank you for your work and your blessing. I want to introduce our family and take a moment and first introduce the elder of our family, the matriarch at this moment, none other than Aunt Callie, all the way from Detroit, who is the eldest sister, who is with us, and such a blessing. We had the opportunity to hear some stories that we had no idea about my father when he was small, and so we are so appreciative that you are with us. Along right next to her is the youngest brother, Uncle Mitchell. You may confuse him with my father, as I confused them when they were much younger. I was outside of the house one day, and I was like, "Hey, Dad," and I walked in, and I said, "Dad, you were just outside. How did you do that?" Come to find out, I was looking at my uncle. Next to my uncle is Aunt Barbara, and we are so grateful that you are here for this moment. And then right behind them is my brother and sister-in-law, Kevin and Liz. Go ahead, y'all wave. Go ahead, there we go. So you're going to see them now. Next to Kevin and Liz is this wonder. She's the youngest member of the family, none other than Alora. She is a storyteller, an artist, a dancer. Anything you want to know about anything, just ask Alora, and she'll be more than willing to tell you and have a wonderful conversation with you. Right next to Alora is her mother, Alexis, my niece, my favorite niece. She jokes and says, "I'm your only niece, but you're my favorite niece. I want you to know that. I love you so much." And then next to her is this wonderful young lady by the name of Nikayla. Hey, Nikayla, how are you? Nikayla's giving a little wave. She's a little nervous right now that she's in this space, but it's good to have you with us. And I also want to celebrate, and so glad that Monica, my wife and partner, is with us this evening. And then next to Monica is none other than Mom, Mother Edwina. I mean, she's something else. And my mother and my father have been an amazing partnership over the years, and it is just such a blessing that everyone is together to celebrate this moment. There's one thing that I wanted to say is that I was in my father's library today, and I was looking at the picture of his father, who was born in 1887. And in 1887, it was just a few years after the Emancipation Proclamation that he was still feeling the light of what was known as Reconstruction. But in Georgia, they were moving toward the Reconstruction backlash. And the work of my father is connected to his father and his mother, Magnolia Maltz. Magnolia Maltz and Otis Maltz Sr. What was unique about my grandfather, my father's father, is that after my grandmother passed away as a result of medical apartheid, because there was no specific space to heal and to treat people of African descent, he decided not to get married again. He was a sharecropper. But one of the other things that he also decided not to do is that he did not want to work on land that was owned by someone who would mistreat a person of African descent. So here you have someone in the 1930s who makes a decision to find African American landowners so he could have a fair share in sharecropping. The land that he worked was eventually taken out from under the family he worked for. And found out that it was a major landowner, I think in LaGrange or some of that nature, that it was buying up land from African Americans and then mistreating them in the traditional peonage system. My grandfather said, nope. He said that we're going to leave at this moment and go and find someplace else to work. And he passed on this deep commitment to his children. Every single one, all 5 of his children, that being my father, Uncle Mitchell, Aunt Callie, Aunt Josie, who is now in eternity, along with Aunt Susie, who is in eternity, they all had a deep commitment to voting, a deep commitment to change, because they witnessed a sharecropper and a Southern teacher named Magnolia Maltz, who operated with dignity in the midst of hate. And he picked up that ethic, and he has been carrying that ethic ever since. And so as you honor Otis Maltz Jr., we also celebrate Magnolia Maltz and Otis Maltz Sr. Thank you.
Reverend Moss, thank you. Wow. Like your father, your words of wisdom transcends religion and race and touches all hearts. Thank you. When we set upon this journey to create an interactive biography of Reverend Moss with an innovative tech company called Storyfile, it was more than 3 years ago. We had just released the interactive biography of Holocaust survivor Stanley Bernath, of blessed memory. And something in my gut said, we are not done. We must ask ourselves the same questions in other areas where history can be distorted. What happens when the last activist of the civil rights movement is gone? Who will tell their story? After hours and days of questions and answers filmed using state-of-the-art artificial intelligence technology, Reverend Moss can now tell his story and answer questions well along into the future, mimicking an actual conversation. So the tens of thousands of students and adults who pass through the doors each year will be able to hear the story of the civil rights movement directly from a primary source. We were lucky to be present when Edwina and Reverend Moss stopped by to see the technology come to life on the stage for the very first time. Let's take a look.
We are here at the Maltz Museum, where the Reverend Dr. Otis Maltz Jr. and his wife Edwina are about to see new technology that has turned Reverend Moss into an interactive biography so that visitors will be able to talk with him long into the future.
Oh, hello there.
Using state-of-the-art technology, Reverend Moss was filmed over the course of several days, answering thousands of questions about his life growing up in Georgia, being orphaned at 16, and continuing on to earn a Master's of Divinity from Morehouse College to become one of the foremost thought leaders on civil rights.
What's your story?
I am Otis Moss Jr., an eternal fighter for justice, human rights, civil rights, and the right to be a human being.
In 1961, Reverend Moss moved to Ohio to pastor Mount Zion Baptist Church. While at the church, he was regional director of Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference and was side by side with Dr. King during the Civil Rights March in Selma, Alabama. The two became close friends.
Could you talk about your experiences with racism growing up in the South?
As I grew up, what was then known as the Deep South, Georgia, in the rural area, every moment, every day, the horrors of racism stood before you, beside you, in front of you, and behind you. Going to school, we walked to school. In the sunshine, in the rain, in the mud. But white children rode to basking on warm, comfortable buses. And sometimes the bus driver intentionally ran us off the road. So every day we were aware of the racism and the dangers. And in spite of that, we determined not only to rise above it, but in some way, someday, to fight against it. And that fight continues to this very hour.
In 1975, Reverend Moss chose to make Cleveland his home and spent the next 33 years of his career as pastor of Olivet Baptist Church. A sought-after theologian, author, and speaker, he has lectured nationally and internationally at hundreds of prestigious institutions, traveling to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Through artificial intelligence, Reverend Moss can now share his personal and powerful stories with generations to come.
If I had a few words to give in a story file to children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I love you eternally. Always remember that.
Isn't that just incredible? Reverend Moss, Edwina, every time I open the door from walking down the hallway, go to the auditorium, and I get to talk to you for as much time as I have to fit, 5-10 minutes, it's a big wow for me. I'm inspired. And I invite everyone in this room to be coming to the museum, be part of our beta testing, and to talk, not with that gentleman, but talking to the interactive biography. Without further ado, Reverend Moss, the podium is yours.
Thank you, David.
David, thank you. That could be dangerous without announcing a time limit. But for a few minutes, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the founders of the Maltz Museum. Mr. and Mrs. Maltz, you have made a contribution not just to this community, but to the nation and the world, far beyond your time and space. Thank you. And may the audience thank our couple. Each time I have spent time with Milton Maltz, I have learned something, and one day we were talking, and he said to me, I was born in 1929. I said, wow. That's the year Martin Luther King Jr. was born, and it's the year Anne Frank was born. And I think it is important that we know the story, the message of each one. Behind this presentation, or with this presentation, the Maltz Museum, its wonderful staff, chair, and members of the board reached out to a remarkable person, Sharon Milligan, who tried to prepare me for this magnificent piece of technology. So if you find some flaws in it, do not blame her. It was the subject she was working with. Thank you, Sharon. We always talk about extended family, but that's too weak a word, because when we think of persons like Carol Hoover and Pat Hoover, I succeeded their father at the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church, and he was the one who made Olivet a home and headquarters for Dr. King in Cleveland, when so many people don't know this, so many doors were brutally closed. He had an office and a headquarters at the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. When Dr. Hoover got there, it was Second Olivet. And Dr. Hoover said to the congregation, we must never think of ourselves as second to anybody. So we're going to be a community ministry, institutional ministry in the community. I could go on calling names, forgive me if I do not, but let me say that my heart, my mind, my soul, all together in concert, cry out, thank you, family. And that family includes not just the birth family, but the family of God and the family of humanity, the family of the Maltz Museum and the community. Thank you. The Maltz Museum is a vision, a teacher, a history-bearing voice, a magnificent call, connecting the past and keeping it alive in such a way that it is never the past, with the present and enriching the present in such a way that the future is filled with promise and hope and challenge, information, inspiration, facts, and truth. Thanks again to the Maltz couple and the things you touch. You know, the Maltz Museum, in this age of book banning, is a necessary presence in Cleveland and an example to the nation and the world. The Maltz Museum is a voice 24 hours a day, saying to each of us, stop the hate. Edwina and I met in such a climate. Got to know each other, learn from each other, love each other, marry each other, and 55, 56 years later, we are still in love and still on an extended honeymoon. It shall not stop. In an age when old evils like anti-Semitism and racism are spreading across the human landscape, this terrible poison, this almost omnipotent evil, but I said almost. It is powerful. This stream of hate threatens our democracy on a daily basis. And I believe this museum sends an ethical message of urgency drawn from the ethical teachings found in the Jewish tradition. Teachings that say the time is short, the hour is late, the business is urgent. It is not incumbent upon us, the rabbi, to finish the task. Neither are we free to desist from doing all that we can while we are able, while we are yet alive. And I want to close these brief words with a thank you. Those who have visited Olivet across many years know that my remarks can go extensively, but I will discipline myself in a very special way because my heart overflows with gratitude. And also, I almost tremble to think that 50 years from now, someone will be talking to a piece of technology and I will be giving a response. And one wonders, could I have not said that in a better way, in a more eloquent way? Should I have not touched this subject or that subject, or told this story or that story? However, life is life. Time is short, and the business is urgent. So let me thank all the family gathered here. I am constantly reminded of the last appearance Dr. King made before a Jewish audience. A group of rabbis in New York State, about 10 days before his assassination. And when he was introduced by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Rabbi Heschel, who had marched in Selma. His daughter was on the faculty for a season at Case Western Reserve and is still an active professor and writer. Rabbi Heschel said, Martin Luther King Jr. is a voice, a vision, and a way. And in that audience of rabbis, he said, I call upon every Jew to share his vision, hearken his voice, and follow his way. The very future of America is dependent upon the work of Martin Luther King Jr. And I say this evening that the future of our community, the future of our nation, yea, beyond our borders, will be dependent upon how we fulfill the vision of Stop the Hate.
How do I follow that? Thank you, Reverend Moss. This is really an honor to be up here this evening with you and Edwina. My name is Mary Ann Corrigan Davis. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at the Maltz Museum. You know, we live in a world that is constantly changing with rapid advancements in technology. And thanks to those advancements, we are privileged, and I mean privileged, to host your interactive biography at the Maltz Museum, Reverend Moss. Yet in other ways, we as humans know we have not advanced as we should. Where there is still hate in our times, there is a need for love. And where there is still violence in our world, there is a need for peace. And where there is still division in our society, there is a need for unity. So thank you, Reverend Moss, for being that voice that has not given up, that continues to strive for all of these things, for love, peace, and unity. I hope, I pray that we can get there, and we will get there because of the work you have done and the legacy you have left for us. So on behalf of the Maltz Museum, I'm pleased to present you with a small token of our thanks, a piece of original artwork done by Ronnie Phillips. The inscription on the plaque reads, "The Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, Jr., in honor of your lifelong commitment to equity and justice for all, thank you for leaving a legacy for the next generation." The Maltz Museum, August 31, 2022. And for our guest tonight, I just want to remind you what David had mentioned earlier. If you'd like to speak with the artificial intelligence version of Dr. Moss, please, you're welcome back to the museum at no cost. You should have received some complimentary tickets this evening. So please join us between now and October 22nd to participate in the beta test of this technology. And bring as many guests as you'd like. The more questions that are asked during this test period, the better that technology becomes in the long run. So please join us. And in addition, we hope to see you back here on October 26th for the launch of our upcoming special exhibition, This Light of Ours, Activist Photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. The exposition invites visitors to step into the heart of the Deep South during the 1960s and the Freedom Summer, when ordinary citizens risked everything to change the nation. And during the launch event, we'll venture a few years back further in history with the screening of the film Otis's Dream, the powerful and poignant story of Otis Moss Sr., which Reverend Otis Moss III spoke about. The story of his journey in 1946 Georgia to vote, 20 years before federal legislation prohibited racial discrimination in voting, and a time when a black man's attempt to vote could cost his life. And after the screening, Otis Moss Sr.'s son and grandson, our two Reverend Mosses here this evening, will discuss their mission to fulfill Otis's dream through the civil rights movement of the 60s, the continued struggles of today, with the determination of achieving an equitable tomorrow. Now we hope you'll join us for refreshments in the lobby, and we thank you again for being here tonight. So good night, everyone.